Okay, giggles. This is the lecture for European history for Monday, the 18th of April, 2022. And it is oh so interesting because until about 5 minutes, actually until about 3 minutes ago, I was furious because I thought that I was going to have 5 instructional periods with you this week and only 1 with period 6. And then I realized I'm just going to make period 6 watch the videos. So I'm not upset anymore. They might be, but since this is the last chapter survey that you guys had, the only homework you got for me for the rest of the year, aside from incidental movie worksheets, is the case study. So you guys in period 3 get this in real time. You guys in period 6 are getting this at home, and I'm going to expect you to know all of this when we get to it on Friday.
What if they don't?
If they don't, then they will be out of luck and vulnerable when it comes time to test.
Should we not tell them that they should watch the video?
Oh no, you should tell them.
That's not very nice.
You should definitely tell them.
We can tell Josh. That's it.
But I will tell. In any event, it's nice to know that your generosity and Christian Easter spirit is coming out.
Amen.
In a good way.
Amen. And a woman. Don't forget that one.
Can I please have a couple of people to hand out? Okay.
Hey.
Jane.
Hey.
Thank you.
Hey.
Sandra.
Hey.
Thank you. Portia, do you want to?
No.
Portia.
Haley, I suppose you can do that. Anyone who's not here, put it in the folder.
Fine. We should look at that.
Portia.
Rules of sailing vessels.
Chancy. Chowder.
You're a little.
What?
Remember to turn your quiz into the shelf when you're done.
No, she's there. Jam.
What I'm about to give you, ladies and gentlemen who are settling down now, is one of the favorite lessons of my communist professors at Bates College. Because, like all good American communists, their major argument, they were a husband and wife couple, by the way. Oh, they were lovely. He looked like Karl Marx. He had this giant beard.
I know someone who looks like Carl.
And she was a very thin, aesthetic type professor with a masculine haircut. Anyway, they were good teachers. I actually kind of liked them, but they were definitely American communists. Which means communism is all about the dream, baby. It's not about the reality. Because the reality stinks on ice. But the dream, if you don't think about it, if you assume that we're hive creatures like bees and ants, oh, the dream is so wonderful. It's not. In any event, this is a lesson about, well, it starts with Bolshevik Visions. Oh, what would art, architecture, and music be like in a new communist utopia? Please close the shades. Miss Willis, close the shade slats over there. Shut the fan off, Sam, and close the shades.
Her name's is what?
And Mr. Smith, if you would kindly shut the lights off, please. So what we're going to start with is, and because it's all whited out on the screen, I feel no need to pause it yet.
I want to meet somebody whose name is
There we go.
Hugo?
Like Hugo?
Yeah, like Yugoslav.
Oh. I knew someone named you know, but not Hugo.
Wait.
David, he's over there.
David, you should name your child Hugo. Well, also not to Yugoslavia.
You should name yours Veronica.
Why?
Veronica Velasco. She could be double V.
Hey, but I'm a girl, so my name is
Oh.
Oh.
That's true.
Maybe you're like, I want to.
Well, you might find and marry a guy named Juan Velasco or something. That's possible too.
Here's one with your face.
No, Maddie.
See, that looks really ugly.
Okay, we start out with the Tatlin Tower. See, okay, this tower is sort of like the Eiffel Tower in the sense that it is a structure. But what this was intended to be was eventually it was going to be the structure that housed a giant communist skyscraper dedicated to the international proletariat, and it would be like a global workers' headquarters or something. Now, it has a Tower of Babel type vibe in the sense that you've got this sort of writhing around wrapping. And it has a Leaning Tower of Pisa vibe in the sense that it's off-kilter. But symmetry is so patriarchal, cisgendered male Western civilization. And they were trying to get away from that. So Tatlin's Tower was a proposal during the early Bolshevik period before the Civil War. All of these are around, Lenin's time, very early Bolshevik time, for the world's largest building. And this was going to be the world's tallest and largest building. This is before the Empire State Building was built. But you get a sense of a new aesthetic, of an aesthetic that is not rooted in classicism, in the norms of architecture up till this point. And this, remember, is just before the Bauhaus movement, which we'll talk about, which will lead to the international style of absolutely unadorned glass and steel skyscrapers around the world in the mid-20th century. So this is a step towards that. Now, I've always associated this, maybe it's because of the wrapping motion, with a painting from the time at the beginning of the war.
Oh no. Let's make sure we don't.
Called Nude, Descending a Staircase. And this is Cubism. The idea is that you can reduce all art to its cubical form. And I'm sure that in Mrs. Ketchum's class, you did some of that when you were doing, learning to do portraits and things like that.
What is it?
This is Nude Descending a Staircase. And it is because of the gyric effect, the sort of swirling effect, that I see a connection to Tatlin's Tower. But this is before World War I. It's just at the beginning of World War I, just at the outset. But this is a nude descending a staircase, and what you can see is the motion and the various components that make the human form reduced to mathematical symbols or mathematical logic. You've got ovals and rhomboids and a bunch of things. And you were seeing this nude almost in a blur form moving. That's where the movement comes from, down the staircase. So this is not a Bolshevik vision. But I do see a connection between that and this, if only the wrapping. Yes?
It looks kind of like they had a wedding cake made out of steel, and then someone sat on it.
There's that too. That's nice. I like that. I wonder if you could make an edible Tatlin Tower. If you ever have a commie buddy, like in college or in your family, you could talk. You could show that to a baker and have them do a cake. But have there be lots of red and a big red yellow star on top. You know, that would be the frosting. Okay. So now we've got. Oh, I'll do it over here. Why not? Painting.
Oh wow.
Okay.
What are you doing?
This is Kazimir Malevich's famous painting, White on White. Oh, wait, no, I went big.
That's
I want big. So,
Wow.
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
That's beautiful.
So,
Wow.
Kazimir Malevich
Wow.
is a painter who is trying to plumb the new possibilities in this revolutionary age. So his breakthrough painting, White on White, is an indication of this.
I'm sorry.
Now, what you see here, you can't see, at home, is there is a sort of cold white rectangle that's slightly off kilter. That's about its axis. And it is painted on a warm white field. So this is sort of white gray, and this is sort of white tan, or white beige. White on white. Now, it is a step. Yes, because Malevich definitely was a white supremacist when he painted this.
You sound like Mario.
You can see how this compares something realistic to Nude on a Staircase. And Nude on a Staircase is sort of the halfway point between a realistic painting and this, which has no attempt to be in any way realistic. You just don't understand modern art. You just don't. And eventually this will lead to Jackson bleeping Pollock. We will learn about in the mid-20th century. I'll give you a hint now. My high school art teacher knew Jackson Pollock because he was an artist in the New York scene in the 1950s and 60s. And so he went to Jackson Pollock's parties. And whenever Jackson Pollock went to an artist party, he'd take the New York phone book, which is really, really thick, and he'd basically slap India ink on it with a big fat brush and rip out the pages, which the hosts really loved, by the way, and handed them to people saying, someday these will be worth money. He was right. I think one of those sold for about $1 million 20 years later. So Jackson Pollock became famous in the mid-20th century for grabbing wads of paint in his bare hands and winging them at the wall that had a big canvas on it. And it's splatter painting. Yes?
I don't see how this painting can be racist because it's white.
How, you can't see or you can't see?
It's white, it can't be racist.
Well, no, you don't understand. Left-wingers say black people can't be racist. Brown or yellow people can't be racist.
It's white. How can you be racist towards white?
No.
Oh,
I get it. No, but it is white supremacy in that white is the only color. Because you're going to love this. Science. White is all the colors. It is. Of the rainbow. No! So, now, we are going to do music. And I will have to pause it once I get started.
Body positivity logic is everywhere. Can we please watch that? It's only 4 minutes. If body positivity logic was used everywhere. Please.
You watch it yourself on your own time.
Wait. Dude,
it
was so bad.
Okay. So, Arseny Avraamov is going to make a new kind of music, a new proletarian music. And this is going to inspire communist Russians during the Civil War period. This is played at Baku. It is Symphony for Factory Whistles. And it's going to involve all of the various factory whistles and large-scale industrial equipment of the oil-rich city of Baku on the Caspian Sea, north of the Caucasus. North or south? I think Baku is just south of the Caucasus Mountains. But it's in that region. So this is a bit of Arseny Avramov's Symphony for Factory Whistle.
I can only imagine how good this is going to be.
Well, it's explosive music. So, what we just saw and heard was Arseny Avramov's Factory Siren Symphony, followed by something from the 1990 situation comedy television show Home Improvement, which had a bunch of modern construction workers playing on tools. For those of you at home, these videos are going to be linked, so you can see them at home without any copyright violation. You may not like the Factory Symphony, the Siren Symphony, but understand the 1812 Overture, which also uses cannons, is not the most grand piece of music ever written. Tchaikovsky basically combined a bunch of national songs and cannon sounds in this sort of victorious overture, to celebrate the defeat of Napoleon. The important thing to understand from an artistic and intellectual standpoint is they're trying to do things that have not been done before. The whole point is, if up until now we've been realistic, we're going to be completely theoretical. If up until now we have been rooted in bourgeois notions of aesthetics and beauty and balance and form and style and all that stuff, we're going to throw all that out and we're just going to go for white on white. Instead of relying upon Stradivari, the Stradivarius violins and expensive pianos and harpsichords, we're going to rely on the tools that everyday people use because, and this is what I see as the grain of truth, because everyday people make music. And that music, which traditionally has been called folk music, is a source of creativity and of worthy art. It's not merely high culture, but popular culture or folk culture that can produce things that are worth reading, seeing, hearing, building. That's the idea. Now, what I'll do is I'll connect it to today. 100 years ago, most American families who could afford it had a piano. It wasn't a big, giant piano. It was one of those little pianos with a narrow body. And what people would do when they had dinner parties, and they would have dinner parties a lot more frequently than most people do today. They'd have family over, friends over, neighbors over. And after the meal, they would gather around the piano and they would sing. They wouldn't turn on a music machine for some professional to belt out tunes. They would sing because that's, people bought sheet music. And there'd be somebody at the piano and everyone would be singing around them. And that's sort of a great thing to do. In a similar way, people would write and read their own poetry, or they would tell their own stories. People entertained each other. They entertained themselves. People produced art. It was expected. It was a normal part of life. And as the 20th century moved on, more and more people left it to the professionals, to recorded music, to written stories, written poems. And eventually, it no longer is participatory. Most of us today who aren't in Mr. Harrison's or Ms. What's the choir teacher's name? Frisch's. Thank you. I know this. I just couldn't recall it. People who aren't in Miss Frisch's or Mr. Harrison's classes, how many of you make music yourself? And how many of you do you think will make music 10 years from now when you're adults? The thing about participatory art, about folk art, about everyday people making art and performing it, is that art is not an other. Art is an us. It's part of our lives. And I think one of the keys to happiness is finding something creative that you can keep doing throughout your life. Maybe you change from thing to thing. But to rely on professionals, to rely on Taylor Swift to do your singing, is I think, even if you like her work, you lose something by no longer being a producer of art or music yourself. So in that sense alone, I see some validity in this idea. But really what they're trying to do is they're trying to create a new society. And the first principle of that new society is it's different from the old. If it's different, let's give it a try. So that's what was behind that. It's different sounding. than a symphony.
Yeah, it's literally just like putting explosions into it.
You know what? You get the right set of explosions, and you've got a bombastic set of music. Forget it. Okay. So, any questions, comments, or thoughts, or does anyone wish to suggest other avant-garde, Bolshevik-y type music? Is that a hand, man?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I recognize that. Yeah, like, that's a hand.
That's a hand. It is. You're such a good friend. You really are setting your buddy up.
She wants to sing it too.
No.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember what era Prokofiev was, but I know he was like around that time as well.
Yeah, a little later. And actually, we're going to do something with Shostakovich when we go into Stalin in the 30s, probably tomorrow, maybe Wednesday.
There's another composer character who never lived in Russia during that time as
Well, there was, Kakachurian, there was Shostakovich, there's Prokofiev. Those are the big ones that I can think of, but maybe you can think of someone. If you get it, just write it and send it to me or whatever. Be happy to. Yeah.
In band class, we had to listen to this piece by this Polish composer. It was called Sounds of the Room. It was 4 minutes and I think like 12 seconds or something like that of just pure silence, where it was on stage, performed in front of like a couple 100,000 people. And he just like stayed there in just complete silence, and he was crying like over how beautiful it was.
Look, understand something.
No, like,
there is what is in here. And one of the glorious things about being a sentient creature, a human being, is that we can make meaning out of things that others don't understand at all. The fact that everyone sat there silently for 4 minutes and change, that's something. What it is people gave his idea a real chance. You don't think 4 minutes is a long time when you're sitting there doing nothing in a giant crowd. It is. It really is. Silence is tough. One of my favorite scenes from any movie is from the movie The Sand Pebbles, which is about a gunboat, an American gunboat on a China river in the 1920s. And there's a scene where the new engineer is introduced to his old steam engine. And it's about 4 minutes. And what it does is he is touring it, and all you hear is the sound of the engine idling. That's it. And he's going through and looking at the various pieces because he's an engineer, and this is where he will do his thing, where he will work his craft, where he will make his art. And his relationship to the engine ends up being more functional than his relationship to any other person. But it takes guts for a filmmaker to do that. Anyway, very cool. I'm curious to know, was it a composer from now that did this, or?
I think it was in early 2000s.
Okay,
yeah.
So roughly contemporary. That makes sense. Don't completely rule out modern art. When you're in college, I suggest that you explore. I took part in participatory theater. I saw experimental ballet. It's not the sort of thing I ever stuck with, but I'm glad I did because it was interesting. And there should be a point in your life where you're curious enough to do things that might seem silly just because they might end up finding some way into your psyche. That it might be something that you end up liking. You never know. Hell, you might even read James Joyce's something about Playboy of the Western World. I can't stand James Joyce. The man writes in his own language, and it's just crazy. But you should try it. I tried it. I gave it a few pages, and I said, this is not for me.
A few pages.
A few pages. It's its own language. I'm telling you, look it up. Playboy of the Western World. James Joyce. He's Irish. Okay.
Wait, I'm confused.
Now, all of these Bolshevik visions are going to end up being crushed by the needs of the reality that Soviet Russia is facing. So, look at the time. Next time, we will go into the Russian Civil War.
Okay.
Thank you. Come again.